This took 12 years to make. Can you believe it? Boyhood took 12 years to make. This movie took 12 years to make. 12 whole years! If you've heard any discussion about Boyhood, well, you've heard the fact that it took 12 years to make. In fact, it might have been all you heard about it. And depending upon who said it, it might have been said with appreciation and awe, or mockery, as some people thought that it was just a gimmick. Now, before I dive into the film, I want to share a quick story. Do you have any cinema experiences that are unforgettable? Any times that you've gone to the movie and the movies have affected you in such a way that you will always remember it? Well, that was Boyhood for me. I drove almost 4 hours to New Orleans with a group of friends to see the film because it had a rolling release when it came out, so we didn't know if it was actually going to come to our town. We saw it at the Prytania Theater, and by the end, all of us were crying. I mean, it was the perfect film for us. You see, I'm only about 2 months older than the main actor, and so watching him grow up on screen with my group of friends, it was like all of us were growing up together all over again. And then at the end, when his childhood is over, so was ours, and we felt it. It didn't matter that Mason grew up in Texas and we grew up in Florida. The experience was the same. It was universal. Watching the movie, it makes sense that Linklater shot it over the course of 12 years. If the actors had changed with each year, it just wouldn't have the same impact. But how is the film made? How does a director take over a decade to make a single movie? Well, for one, he made other movies during this time, so it's not like all of his time was dedicated to Boyhood. But it's not just the director, it's the cast and crew. It's everyone involved, but cast especially because anything they did during the year might show itself on the film. For this reason, Linklater asked Patricia Arquette to not get any plastic surgery during the 12-year period because it would negatively affect the film. Eller Coltrane would consult with Linklater anytime he wanted to do something, like get his ears pierced. The actors lived their lives outside of the film, but the way in which they lived their normal lives affected the movie. Now, Linklater would alter the script a bit to account for these year-to-year changes, as well as take into account the popular culture of the day. That's if you believe that there was a script when they were shooting the film. Several of the actors claimed that they never saw one. But what I'm getting at is that this is a lived-in film. We're seeing the characters grow up in age, but we're also seeing the actors grow up in age. It's weird how this 12-year production schedule creates a film that is both fictional, but is also a record of real-life people aging. Makeup effects aren't used to make people look younger or older than they really are. Quite the opposite, in fact. There were occasions when Eller wanted makeup applied to him because he had zits on his face, but Linklater wouldn't allow it. And for good reason. Dealing with acne as a teenager is a universal experience. Most of us wish it wasn't, but it is. That being said, it's not like Linklater kidnapped the actors, forced them to stay in character for 12 years, and filmed every day of their lives before condensing it all down into a movie just shy of 3 hours long. No, Linklater lives in reality, not in a Charlie Kaufman movie. Well, with maybe the exception of Lorelei Linklater, Richard Linklater's daughter, who plays as Samantha and reportedly urged her dad to kill off her character because she was sick of being in the movie. So, Boyhood was shot over the course of 12 years, sure. But they only had 45 shooting days for the entire film, which means that each year the cast and crew only had about 3 to 4 days to shoot each segment, and each segment in their final forms were between 10 and 15 minutes long apiece. The whole budget for the film was only $2.4 million, so if we're going to assume that the money was distributed equally, that's $200,000 per year that the film was made. So even though Boyhood is one long feature film, Linklater shot it like a series of short films that segment with each other quite seamlessly. And the desire to have the segments dovetail each other caused Linklater to decide to shoot on 35mm film. Shooting on 35mm film was the Hollywood standard at the time that he started the 12-year project, but around this time, Linklater had dabbled in digital video, having shot Waking Life and Tape on DV. He definitely saw HD video as a viable option for filmmaking, but he understood that digital technology advances and changes quite rapidly. So even though it might have been cheaper and easier to shoot Boyhood digitally, it would either cause each segment to be visually distinct from each other, or it would cause the movie 12 years later to be obsolete technologically. If it was the former, well, that would just ruin the flow of the movie and be quite jarring for audiences. Film, on the other hand, doesn't change nearly as drastically, and in my opinion, it just looks better. The changes we notice in the segments are the changes in the characters. Maybe they're a bit taller, have a different haircut, hang out with different friends, live in a different town, or go to a new school. We don't notice most of the segment transitions, but we can feel when it's a new year, and one of the main indicators Linklater uses to highlight the year is pop culture. There isn't an actual score to the film, but Linklater and music supervisor Randall Poster compiled a soundtrack out of songs that were popular in the years the segments took place. What's a better way to transport you back to feeling like you're in middle school than listening to Soulja Boy? Also, listening to Arcade Fire's The Suburbs while driving around town was one of my favorite activities as a teenager. And if I can just go on a quick tangent for a few seconds, two of the side characters in Boyhood were also in scenes from The Suburbs, the movie to the album The Suburbs, which was directed by Spike Jonze. Both movies were filmed in Texas, so it makes sense, but it was neat seeing Sam Dillon and Zoe Graham appear in the movie. Getting back to the point, music can elicit strong memories and feelings, and we often attach songs we love or used to love with certain periods in our lives. So Linklater's decision to date each segment with popular music was masterful, and ending the movie with Deep Blue, epic. There are more cases of pop culture as well as historical events in Boyhood. The characters all watch movies and television shows. They play Halo 2 and Wii Sports. They watch the news that covers the Iraq War, and they participate in the 2008 presidential campaign on behalf of their dad. It would be easy for Linklater to just insert all of these for the purpose of just serving as shallow references, but he doesn't. He transforms all of it by the context in which he places these references. Mason, Samantha, and their step-siblings watch Funny or Die when their father is on an alcoholic rage. Mason plays Wii with his mom's friend's kids after he, his sister, and his mom escaped from an abusive household. He plays the Wii to try to cope with the situation, and the fact that the other kid offers to play with him is a much needed dose of hospitality. This segues us into my theory about the movie. A film theory. The way that I see the film is that it's not so much us watching him grow up, but it's more like we're looking into his memories of his childhood, like we're remembering all of this with him. Why do I think that? Well, we don't really see any major life events. We don't see his actual graduation, or his first kiss, or anything that we could conventionally deem a milestone in a person's life. We see the little memories. Memories like the one where he played the Wii after escaping his abusive stepdad, or the night he and his girlfriend visited Austin because he was considering attending UT, or when his dad told him that he wasn't going to get his car.
Those big milestones that movies typically show us, like there are these memories that we're going to cherish for the rest of our lives, like graduation. They don't normally mean as much to us as memories that are more mundane and everyday. I mean, a graduation is a graduation. Speeches are made, you wait in line for a long time, you collect papers. I mean, usually everyone's pretty happy and it's a positive memory, but it's not very personal. Now, the graduation party where your uncle gets drunk and lacks a filter on what he says, making everyone uncomfortable, that is a personal memory. That's why Boyhood manages to not feel like a bunch of random segments thrown together in some haphazard way. A lesser filmmaker would have shown all of Mason's milestones, but Linklater knew that we didn't really care about those, and neither did Mason. Also, I think that's why there isn't really this grand overarching story to the movie, other than the story of just Mason growing up and his parents growing older.
There are some small storylines and characters outside of the main family that are present for a couple years at a time, but, like Mason's friend at the beginning of the movie, they all leave his life with hardly a goodbye. We're not watching just some series of events when we watch Boyhood, we're watching a life. And every time I watch Boyhood, I know that it's 3 hours long, but it goes by in a flash. That is like life. Time is moving along and you feel it. But after a time you look back at how much time has passed and you just wonder where all of it went. Linklater has been experimenting with the concept of time since his very first films. Both Slacker and Dazed and Confused occur over a roughly 24-hour time period. Tape, as well as Before Sunset, takes place in real time. The Before trilogy films are all made 9 years apart from one another and take place 9 years apart from each other, serving as a trilogy of films following a fictional relationship over the course of 18 years. If there's a concept or a running theme that you can connect to Linklater, it's time.
But really, cinema is about time. Time limits movies. Generally, if a movie is too long, it's not viable. And if a movie is too short, it's probably not going to get a theatrical run unless it's opening up for a feature-length film. When we watch a movie that bores us, we feel time marching along slowly. But when we watch a movie that excites us and entertains us, we forget about time completely. Movies distort time. They shape it. A movie can be 90 minutes long, but take place over the course of 10,000 years, or over the course of 90 minutes or less if we're looking at one event from multiple perspectives. Time is both master and slave to film. That's the power that editing gives a filmmaker, the power to control time within the runtime of a movie. There's a reason that Tarkovsky titled his book Sculpting in Time. which is a book I recommend. So obviously, Linklater wasn't the only director fascinated with time, but it makes sense, since time is endemic to film, as paint is to painting.
So, in Boyhood, we get 2 hours and 45 minutes of Mason's life over a 12-year period. We weren't with him for 12 years, but we felt like we were. But what doesn't matter? In the grand scheme of things, what's the difference between a few hours and 12 years? Compared to infinity, they're both practically nothing. But compared to the lifespan of the Earth, they're also both practically nothing. And for me, Boyhood helps me realize this fact. At the end of the film, it's like Mason's childhood is over, and it all seemed to happen so quickly. But doesn't it feel like that in real life? You're a kid with not a worry in the world, and you just seem to wake up one day and all of that is over, and you can't get it back. It's all in the past. You feel like you were a kid just yesterday, but you're actually remembering yourself 8 years ago. Then, you project this feeling that you have to the future and think to yourself, are the next 25 years of my life gonna go by this quickly? And you know that the answer is yes. So really, coming to terms with time and how it moves, or how it never ceases to stop moving, is also a way of confronting your own mortality. Perhaps that's why Linklater shows us Mason looking at the dead bird at the beginning of the film. This is where time eventually leads all of us. But as we grow older in age, we accumulate memories. Some memories we forget and some we don't. Not that we have much control over what we end up remembering, but those memories come to define us. Those memories become our life story. And even if we aren't superheroes or historical figures, our lives are interesting and meaningful. Boyhood's a great film, not because anything great happens in it, but because it shows a normal life in all of its wonder and beauty and banality, a relatable life.
Home, home, with you I am home. Home.